Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second day of EBAA's Virtual Safety Summit. I would like to thank our three main sponsors for making this event possible, Bombardier Aviation, Dassault Aviation, and Gulfstream. And I would like to draw your attention to a few items of housekeeping. The cameras and the microphones, as you might have noticed, will be off for all the attendees throughout the event. However, if you want to ask a question live, and if the time allows, the moderator may allow you to be unmuted and ask your question live. Also, you can ask all of your questions through the Q&A tool that you can find at the bottom of the screen. And if we do not get to your question, or if you get a question in your mind sometime during or after the event, we are more than happy to receive your questions at safety@ebaa.org. The meeting will be recorded video and audio, and you will be able to access the recordings through the EBAA website. Now, I did not introduce myself. My name is Corina Stiubei, and I'm the Manager for Safety Data Analysis and Performance Review at EBAA. I will be your host for the remainder of the summit. That will be today and tomorrow. Now, yesterday, we have had very, very interesting presentations. And we started with a presentation from Mike Lemay, Chief Air Safety Investigator at Bombardier. He presented a case study in which a Challenger 350 had a jump spoiler on final approach. The crew followed the procedure and increased the final approach speed, despite the fact that the pilot had trouble controlling the aircraft with the increased speed and the flaps in landing mode. The aircraft landed safely and uneventfully. It was later determined by Bombardier investigation that the combination of a jump spoiler at 7.6 degrees and the flaps at 30 degrees triggered a flow separation and reattachment on the flap behind the jammed spoiler. This led to a pilot-induced oscillation, finding which was determined to represent an unacceptable risk by the Bombardier Continuing Airworthiness Review Board, also known as CARB. They recommended that the regulator should issue an airworthiness directive mandating the incorporation of the aircraft flight manual revision throughout the fleet. The Bombardier team developed and tested new procedures, which were then revised and submitted to Transport Canada, EASA, and the FAA. The AFM, the QRH, and the FCOM were updated, and each of the authorities issued an advisory directive, with Bombardier issuing an advisory wire on their side. I would like to remind you to check the recording of this year's Bombardier Safety Stand Down and keep an eye on news from Bombardier's 2021 Safety Stand Down, which will be their 25th anniversary edition. Then we continued with an excellent panel, how do we prepare for the unexpected and how do we continue operations, a panel steered by EBAA COO, Robert Baltus, who was joined by Iris Reason, Accountable Manager for CAT Aviation, Maxime Wouters, the Group Safety Manager, Marketing and PR Manager, and Pilot at ASL Group, and Stefan de Wolf, ISBEO EU Operations Specialist for IBAC, the International Business Aviation Council. Resilience is about building the company's capacity to anticipate, seeing developing signs of trouble ahead, to being adapt early. Synchronize, adjust different roles at different levels. Be ready to respond and develop capabilities in advance. Proactively learn about weaknesses, but also how surprises were caught and successfully resolved. We learned that resilience in people cannot be taught. It's a state of mind. Human resilience is mainly about being able to recharge. It's the psychological capability to adapt to stressful circumstances and to bounce back from adverse events. A misconception is that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So people plow through adversity thinking they're building up their own resilience, sometimes following unrealistic goals, and they burn out. On the other hand, effective communication can be trained, but it requires also an effort from the team to apply it on a daily basis. In case of a new and unpredicted situation, the team needs to be kept informed and involved, and decisions should not be taken on a hierarchical level, but rather made as a team. When an unexpected event occurs, there needs to be a balance and flexibility between the roles, and the hierarchy needs to be flattened for the greater good, as a team effort rather than an individual action. I will conclude with a statement by Iris about resilience based on a Zen principle. From a resilience perspective, the water is stronger than a stone. The water can change its shape to go around the rock and regroup later to continue its journey, while the rock is stuck to the ground and does not move in any direction. We came back after lunch with a presentation from Timothy Atkinson, a professional pilot and expert in aviation safety, operations and training, who spoke to us about crashing in compliance, where regulation went wrong. Tim stated that the industry went from the old days in which doing their daily business, things that we do to operate without hurting or killing anybody or without damaging objects, was enough to satisfy the regulator. And we came to the situation nowadays when only when not only the two workloads, the daily operations and the compliance do not have equal weight, but especially for smaller operators, the compliance part is almost disconnected and significantly larger than the work required for the operations. When Tim asked the audience, what do they think about the statement, safety is our first priority, most answers were in the same direction. Ingraining safety in everything we do, and safety is a part of our job and an activity. A living organism with systemic holistic approach, a process rather than an outcome, very much in the way a flower blooms. So, why do we do what we do? Because it makes sense. Human factors provide the most fascinating study for the accident investigator, and they're also possibly the most important route towards zero harm. Aviation operates with expectation that its practitioners are good people trying to do good things. Sadly, this is a misconception. Some of them are not good people and some of them are not trying to do good things. This is the presumption of good intent, or the POGI principle. Be wary of its consequences. We continued the afternoon and we concluded our sessions for yesterday with two ladies from Clear to Land, Edith Tieber and Kerstin Murmenthaler, who spoke to us about ERP, not just an exercise to tick a box. They discussed with us the experience as pilots and consultants and took us through their 8 principles behind the Clear to Land philosophy. Flight plan, expect the unexpected, checklist procedures, clear to land, your control, my control, focus on your horizon, make a decision, and debriefing. And I really like one of the comments from Nani Lata, who said that the key takeaway was you can always be better prepared and let the professionals help you learn how to. Now I'm very pleased to see that many of you have joined us again this morning for what promises to be another exciting day of discussions on resilience and human factors in business. Now I would like to thank our sponsor for today, Dassault Aviation, for supporting this event, and introduce Mr. Carlos Brana, Senior Executive Vice President, Civil Aircraft at Dassault Aviation. Carlos has graduated from the École Centrale de Paris, where he received his engineering degree, and he also has an MBA from École de Haute Études Commerciales. He joined Dassault Aviation in 1984 as an engineer in the design office, where he worked on the Rafale demonstrator, the Mirage F1 and the Mirage 2000 programs. He occupied several positions in the company, such as Middle East Vice President of Sales, Vice President of Contracts and Specifications for Dassault Falcon Jet in Teterboro, Senior Vice President for Teterboro Operations, being appointed a Senior Executive Vice President for Civil Aircraft at Dassault Aviation in July 2019. Joining Mr. Brana today will be EBAA COO, Mr. Robert Baltus, who will be moderating your question. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Corina, for this good introduction, and we look forward to a good interview with Carlos today. I'm pleased to have Carlos because he has such a wide background in aviation, and I'm very interested, if we think about what we talked about yesterday when we were speaking about resilience, to hear from an OEM how they perceived what has happened, but also what has been the impact on the OEMs and what they think about how they saw how the changes were happening regarding COVID-19. So first of all, welcome, Carlos, and very pleased to have you. And we would love to hear, with a very wide question, how was your organization affected by the pandemic, and how did you manage to continue the operations?
So good morning, everyone. For me, of course, it's a pleasure, to talk with you. Actually, to answer your questions, your question, it's a very broad one, but let's say it's just a matter of priorities. When we saw the pandemic coming, of course, the first reflex on our side was to preserve our employees' health. So, of course, we developed, like anyone else, we developed the teleworking. By the way, it was mandatory since most of us were confined. But also, every job cannot be performed with the telework. So we have to have people building the airplanes and so on and so on. So those ones are not going to be done, staying home and so on. So we have to develop a certain number of measures, and those were the social distancing measures, which would allow the people, to continue working on the airplanes or for maintenance, for the manufacturing, and so on and so on. So let's say, when we had this pandemic coming and we had to be confined, first of all, we sent people teleworking. And it was an increase, a huge increase in terms of MIS issues, because we started 400 people teleworking on a regular basis to more than 4,000. So you imagine all the processes we had to put in place in order, to satisfy the users of the computer from home. The second thing we did is, of course, we developed the social distancing measures, and for that reason, we had to interrupt, the production and so on for about 15 days, during which we put in place those measures. And the good news is that those measures are still valid today, meaning that what we did, in the March timeframe, March-April, is still valid today, since we have a second wave of coronavirus, and what we have defined before exists today. And the good news again is that when we come working, when we apply those social distancing measures, there is no way we can propagate the virus inside the company, which means, by the way, that sometimes it's safer to come working here than staying home. Now, the other aspect is, of course, to continue your question, because of the slowdown in the activity, we had to reassess our priorities. And so our priorities were basically, to be compliant with our commitments toward the customer. So the customers, of course, they use their airplanes, so they need support. So we said, okay, we'll continue supporting the customers as much as we can. And that's what we did. The second aspect was the delivery of the airplane. So we continued after, defining those social distancing measures. We continue manufacturing and delivering the airplanes. And sometimes it was quite, aerobatic, to do the things the way we wanted to, because we had also to transfer, planes from from Bordeaux to Little Rock, and sometimes it was not that easy. And the third, but we wanted to deliver the airplane because some customers were waiting for them. And you understand that at the time where we had limitations in transportation, the fact that on their own they could use their own airplane was certainly a good thing for them. The third thing we did also is to continue maintaining the development programs. We are committed to our customer, to deliver a 6X. Starting 2022, we need to meet that commitment. So that's the reason why we continue working as much as we could in order not to delay this program that some customers have been waiting for years. Voilà. I think you're muted, Robert.
Well spotted. There we go. I can imagine that with all those changes, and I'm actually really surprised, and it shows that if you still have the same measures valid now, you definitely did the right thing at the beginning of the first lockdown. What was the biggest surprise you run into? Because I think if we talk about maintaining contact with customers is one, but inspections on airplanes on delivery, and you mentioned the little rock, so moving things. What was the biggest surprise you run into?
To be honest with you, the surprise came from the behavior of our fellows employees or friends and so on. It's, you know, most of times when we deal with people in a professional, let's say, way, we just look at them the way they act professionally. What we forget sometimes, but in our company, it's a little different because we are really much a family. But it's their personal behavior. When we are in front of such a thing, which is not only unpredictable but it's beyond your control, the behavior of people is extraordinary, and particularly the dedication they had, not only to continue their job, which was exceptional, I would say, but also, so there was no people saying, oh, I give up, that's it, we'll see next time. No, they continue doing their job. And the second thing is that dedicated themselves to do other things. Where I see the biggest surprise is, for example, people who are not necessarily particularly involved in medical things and so on, they help, you know, the transportation of medical people. They organize flights. They even, you know, rejuvenate, let's say, an organism which name is Aviation Sans Frontières, so Aviation Without Borders, in order, you know, to organize such flights. So those were dealt with solidarity and so on. And the surprise, or I should not be a surprise, but it is, if it was, is the fact that people sometimes behave in a new form. And I would say this is a new heroism form, something that we are not used to see, because sometimes we just don't have the opportunity to see it. But when it happens, it's a real thing.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we had the session on resilience yesterday, that was one of the things that people were talking about as well, is that people need to be able to do things other than the normal, and with a new normal like that is obviously a very big thing. So organizationally, you mentioned that you were ready for it, but from a customer support perspective, I guess the customers were also looking at you. What were the things that the operators were looking to you from? What did they need from you?
Yeah, actually, of course, they were looking for information about how to protect better themselves when they are flying the airplanes, which, by the way, it's a normal thing. So the first thing is that we were asked, you know, how to clean the airplanes, what kind of systems they can get in order to filter the air, and so on and so on. And so we define cleaning procedures. We also perform, you know, studies on the air filtering. We sometimes, that's a new thing, we also issued modifications in order to transform an airplane to have a cargo transportation. So, for example, we had a customer who was willing, you know, to send masks all over Europe. So, as you can see in this picture, we just accommodate the airplane and change it with an STC to make sure that the airplane was properly accommodated to transport such goods. So that was one of the things we had to go. And of course, most importantly, we maintain the contact with customers through the organizations of webinars. So we had more than 20, I think it's 26 of them. And we organize those webinars in order for them, you know, to raise their specific concerns and for us to see how we could accommodate them better.
I think I'm the only person who will be smiling at this slide, and I saw it as Bournemouth, and if you look in the back, there's a small shed. That was my first job in the back, but so I was very happy to show this one. Going back to the topic, from a risk perspective, if you look back now, was there anything that you overlooked, or do you think you've covered most of it? If you would do it again, it's always good to look back to see if you covered all corners.
You're right. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the good thing is that because of this interruption, about 15 days of interruption, we had some time to think about what we had to do in terms of preserving the health of the employees. So right now, as I told you, you know, the measures that we defined before are still applicable. And again, we are not transmitting virus within the company, so that's good thing. One thing which was, I don't think we can call it overlooked, but what we were surprised about is how fast the virus came back. You know, we were after summertime, we were confident that it would be behind us, and all of a sudden, end of September, October, puff, the virus came back, and again we are confined, as you may imagine. Although you know, with those social distancing measures, we have the ability to come working like we did in the months of May and June. So I would say, just to answer your questions, I think by properly addressing the problems initially, I think we now have a better way to handle this situation now.
So if we jump a little bit forward and if we look at how you see the current market, where we are at the moment, how do you see the market as it is? Obviously in the middle of the second wave.
Yeah, of course, as you imagine, the market has slowed down drastically, not only, by the way, for us, but also for the operators. We saw, depending on the operators, some of them are barely flying, some others are flying a lot. Depends on the situation. At least what we saw is an average of 30% down in terms of flying hours compared to the same situation, let's say same months last year. So it's difficult situation, and some of our operators are really suffering a lot. Alors, on the other hand, there are still optimism because I would say one of the main motto right now is the fact that, of course, people now are maybe waiting for a vaccine, or maybe because they don't know what's going to happen, they don't feel that comfortable flying with commercial airlines. So that could be a great news for our aviation, business aviation, because of course in that case, we may imagine that when the things will be, let's say, more quiet in terms of pandemics and so on, most probably the reflex will be, why don't I use, you know, the private, or let's say jet, or the business jet to do my job rather than taking the risk of flying with commercial. So I don't want to, by the way, to prevent people to fly commercial, but I think, yes, the business aviation is here for that purpose, is to make sure that we can handle the needs of our customers and also prevent their fears in a nice way.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think if we hear the signals in the market, and you're right on statistics, we're not there, but the nice thing is to hear there's a lot of new customers coming to the market for the prime reasons, which is security and flexibility and connectivity. So obviously EBAA is based in the Brussels and then a bit of Cologne bubble as well. And we see that the politicians never want to see a good crisis go to waste. And so they are still interested in progressing the green agenda. And we almost have like a full reset of aviation, traffic control, etc. So how does Dassault hope to address this?
Let's say we, on our side, we have the ability, you know, to use sustainable aviation fuel up to 50% blend in our tanks, and we are currently looking at possibility to extend up to 100%. Let's say the green aspect, the short-term solution is clearly the use of sustainable aviation fuel. There is no other way in the short term, you know, to solve this issue. Then you can have, of course, compensations of offsets through, you know, your participation to green foundations and so on. But let's say for us, if we want to decrease the emissions of carbon dioxide, clearly the best way so far is the use of sustainable fuel. We, of course, are pushing in order, to have, with you, by the way, to have production and also distribution of such a fuel. And as you know, for example, in France, it's still difficult to get this fuel somewhere. So we last time when we, what was more than a year ago, when we tried, to get a load of this fuel, we had to go to Dinar, and because it was difficult to get procured. But anyway, this is something which is going to happen, and hopefully with the right level of production. And the second possibility is, as you imagine, the developments of electrical airplane and or airplanes with hydrogen. Electrical will not really work with the weight of battery, will not really work in our segment. Other segments may be interested, why not? In ours will be very, very difficult. Now, the hydrogen, and we see a lot of people talking about hydrogen, a lot of studies are implemented and so on. It's not really for tomorrow morning. I would say some people are talking about 2035 and so on. I would not be surprised that this is the right order of magnitude, because not only we need to design a new airplane, but then after, well, of course, you need to certify it and so on. And hydrogen is not exactly like the normal fuel. Plus the fact that hydrogen will request bigger tanks and so on. So it will be a different airplane compared to what we know today.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time, to say the least, Carlos, because if we, as you rightly point out, there's new technologies, but all have their capabilities and things that can work or not can work. I saw Bruce Perry as one of the people listening in, and I think he fully concurs with you on SAF being the main stopgap solution before any of the other solutions can be there. So to be continued. Now, let's go back to some safety aspects to close this off. I think just back to COVID and most important safety, how are you approaching this during the second wave and going forward? What are the most important things you would like to point out to the audience?
Well, we, because of those safety issues, we have also implemented, some and we are giving some advices to people or to our customers if they look forward to getting them regarding the way to conduct flights. So first of all, the way the pilots are flying the airplanes when they are one after, close to the other, the wear of the mask and so on. But we also have mentioned, some restrictions for passengers. If you put the 14 passengers all together touching each other, it will be a difficult way, to prevent the contamination. So we have defined, procedures with the passengers in order to avoid or limit at least the propagation of virus. Beside that, of course, we have contact with the training providers to also make them sensitive to the issue. Not only we have to define a process with them in order to make sure that there would not be a propagation of the contamination in their facilities, but also we want them to be sensitive, and they are, of course, and pass the message to their pilots or to the technicians to make sure that the virus is contained somewhere and not propagated. And of course, there is also something which is very important, is that we have some of our operators have immobilized the airplane for a certain time. Of course, they know that, but it's just a refresher. They don't want to neglect the fact that because they are now coming back, to flight, they need to perform the proper maintenance. But I'm sure they already know that.
Okay, now let's think about some more positive things, but still in line with the conference. If we look at non-COVID safety, if you see the work you guys have been doing, so what are the biggest contributions you see that are currently coming into view or going forward will bring a safe business aviation environment
But let's say on our side, we have two main topics, I would say. The first is the proper sharing of information between the pilots and the co-pilot. So let's say the situation of awareness of the two pilots have to be exactly the same. So that's why we are working right now on the certification of a double HUD. So both pilots have exactly the same information at the same time. We are also willing, to let's say, to get them more comfortable in sensitive periods of the flight. So, for example, the most sensitive one is always at landing, and at landing, particularly if the weather is not particularly good, we try to help them through different devices. So, as you can see, you have this what we call the combined vision system, which is a mix between camera infrared superimposed with the synthetic vision, so numerical representation of the background and so on. But within this CVS, what we are also developing is some guidance, flare guidance, for example, for landing, smooth landing when the conditions are not that good, and of course leading down the road to what we call the EVS to land, which is the ultimate, to make sure that the crew can operate safely, and particularly when the visibility is none. We also are working on the other aspect of the landing, is the runway excursions. Of course, it's not something that happens every day, fortunately, but again, it's more a matter of comfort than anything else. So we are right now developing also the new functions, which are, the runway overrun awareness and alerting system that will be implemented in our airplane soon, and also the landing distance at time of arrival. So again, those are functions which will be implemented down the road in our airplanes, and this will alleviate, the workload of the crew, or even give them more comfort at the time of arrival on the runway. And of course, the good news is that we never, had loss of control, at least not recently that I remember, thanks to the fact that we have still a very good digital flight control systems, and which our customers are very familiar with, and which will help the airplane to be in control every time.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Carlos. And we have some questions, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through them now, but I'll make sure they're either forwarded to you, or if possible, we will answer it. I think on the website, you have some great examples of the technologies you are referring to. Obviously, it would be great to have EBAAs so you can see it for real in the real aeroplane. So let's hope that this whole COVID saga and vaccination goes out of the window quickly. We can meet in person again and speak to you in person, Carlos, and also hopefully with the people who are attending. So from my side, thank you very much, and for this very nice presentation, and I'll hand it back to Corina.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Brana, and thank you, Robert, for helping us with moderating. Now I would like to thank once again Dassault Aviation for supporting our event, not only this year, but also in the past. And I would like to, again, invite you to keep an eye on their projects, because they are really interesting. Now, I would like to introduce to you our first panel for today. We are going to discuss CAMO, Gap Analysis and Implementation Plan. The panel will be steered by Kyle Martin. He's the Vice President, European Affairs at GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. And he will be joined by David van den Langenbergh, President Aviation Services at Luxaviation Group, Jérémie Neveux, Airworthiness Expert at EASA, and Paulo Pestana, CAMO Regulatory Manager at NetJets. Kyle is a registered chartered engineer at the Engineering Council of the United Kingdom. He is a Northern Ireland native and received his master's degree with honors in aeronautical engineering from the University of Bristol. He's managing the European office of GAMA, being responsible for overseeing their activities in Europe on safety and airworthiness, maintenance, operations, and sustainability, just to name a few of the topics. David has over 20 years of experience in business and commercial aviation and obtained his pilot's license at the age of 21. His career milestones include a few early years spent in general aviation, where he worked as a mechanic before moving to the post of inspector. Following that, he spent 10 years as line and base maintenance manager at Lufthansa and Delta before joining another Belgium-based operator in 2006 as head of Part 145 repair maintenance, station maintenance. Jérémie is a mechanical engineering graduate. Before joining EASA, he worked at Airbus in the A319 and A321 Hamburg delivery center, and then in Toulouse as leading expert on the A330, A340 maintenance program development. He's responsible currently at EASA for the introduction of SMS in maintenance organizations, Part 145, being also involved in the introduction of SMS in CAMO. In this role, he supported the European Commission in the adoption of Part CAMO and coordinated implementation support actions with member states and industry, contributing to the guide for transition to Part CAMO and Part CAO, which was published on the EASA website. Paulo holds a degree in electronics and computer science and a master's of science in air transport management from Cranfield University. With more than 35 years of experience in aviation, ranging from avionics, simulation, engine testing, project management, fleet support, and business development, and CAMO management, Paulo joined NetJets in 2008 and is responsible for the CAMO regulatory matters. He also supports modifications, upgrades, and compliance with avionics mandate, especially as an FAA. He is also the EBAA representative in the EASA Maintenance and Engineering Technical Committee, being the voice of aviation, business aviation in the engineering and maintenance matters. Kyle, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Corina, and thank you to my friends at EBA for the opportunity today to moderate this important panel on the new EASA Part CAMA, which will bring in new and important requirements that will impact the safety and operations of all continuing airworthiness management organizations in the business aviation sector in Europe. The aim of today's session is to help you and the audience and your organizations better understand these new regulations and what they mean for your business, and give you the opportunity to ask our expert and illustrious panel, as Corina has explained, any questions you may have via the online Q&A tool. So at any point during our discussions, please feel free to pop a question on there and I will pose it to the panel at the appropriate point during this session. Firstly, why is SMS and safety management important? Those of you on the operations side will have experienced SMS for many years, but essentially it's all about improving the safety of our operations by preventing accidents and incidents before they happen by having a robust, systematic approach to managing safety risks within our organizations. As you know, it stems from ICAO's Annex 19, which has been around for many years and has led to already SMS requirements being implemented by air operators, aerodromes, ANSPs, and other sectors. EASA has had rulemaking ongoing for some time and soon to be completed on Part 21 for design and manufacturing and Part 145 for maintenance. But the issue we're talking about today is the new rules for CAMO, which were adopted by the European Commission and Member States last year and will enter into force in the very near future. As ever with the EASA rulemaking, it's been a long journey. This rulemaking task was initiated in 2010. Went through various consultations, which many of you may have contributed to, and now we're at the end of the line, shall we say, with the new rule being adopted last year. So I think the best way to start this session is to hear from the authors and initiators of the rules themselves. So I'm going to start off with asking Jérémie and Neveux from EASA to give us an overview of what these new rules mean, what is the new Part CAMO, and how is it going to impact your businesses. Jérémie, over to you.
Thank you, Kyle. Good morning, everyone. So I will take you to a small tour of Part CAMO, and let's start directly with, yes, with what happened actually in the matter of time. So in September 2019, we had this adoption of this regulation 2019-1383, and it was a big package, in fact, because it was not just CAMO, but also the new Part MLight for general aviation and Part CAO as well, this organization for airworthiness and continuing airworthiness, and also another package which was coming from the technical records. So speaking about Part CAMO, in fact, why did we introduce SMS in the first place? In fact, there are 3 reasons for that, because we have to comply with Annex 19 of ICAO, and we have as well, from the EASA basic regulation, we have this requirement to introduce management system and safety management of risk. So, and the third reason why as well, that in air carriers, we have to integrate the CAMO into the air operators, and the air operator had already SMS. So that was 3 good reasons to do that. After this regulation, there was another regulation among it. It was mainly to adapt and improve the transition provision, how to move in particular from Part MG organization to the new Part CAMO. So this transition were better detailed in this amending regulation. So from EASA side, we published the AMC and GM in March 2020. But very important, we also prepared the guide already in January 2020 to prepare this transition to Part CAMO, and also to Part CAO, by the way. Huh? And this transition guide that we published on the website, of course, we discussed it as well with the member states and the competent authority of the member states. So this is really the background. So now, what is the main change? What is this evolution? And the evolution is moving from quality system to management system. And what does it mean? So in the quality system, MS 712, we had main element was really the compliance monitoring your own compliance with the regulation, as well as the feedback system. Feedback system in this investigation, why did this happen? And let's inform the senior management, let's take some measure to close the findings. Now with the management system, we go a little bit beyond, because we have this hazard identification, and that's the reason why I put these 2 points of the regulation on the top, not only the management system, but also the 202, the internal reporting scheme. It's really important to identify hazard effectively, that the organization introduce tools to collect all potential problems that may arise in the organization. So hazard identification and risk management, main topic. But it's not enough. We have to check the effectiveness of the mitigation that we develop through the risk management system. And of course, we don't forget about compliance monitoring. That's a fundamental aspect. So we keep the compliance monitoring, and we keep the feedback system. For the licensed air carrier, the airlines, and we had as a requirement to integrate the quality system into the AOC, operator quality system. Now, with the Part CAMO, this is the same principle. We have to integrate the management system of the CAMO into the management system of the operator. So we want to avoid duplication. We want to take benefit and use synergies to have an efficient system. In the old Part MG, there was a possibility to deviate a little bit from the quality system to have something more light, which was called the organizational review. And this was for small CAMOs. This is no longer possible with Part CAMO, because on the other hand, as we mentioned, we have introduced for small organization and smaller scope of work and scope of aircraft, we have this new Part CAO. And this organizational review is possible with the Part CAO organization, but not for Part CAMO. So what is it? How did we regulate this management system? So there are a few. So it's a point CAMO 200, and there are a few main elements. The first main element is really to define responsibility. Who is responsible for what, and accountability. And this we mean that the senior management should really take responsibility and endorse this new methodology and this new attitude, let's say. So responsibility, accountability, and to support this, we need a policy, a clear policy from the organization towards what they are going, and to define also some objective. And then, yes, this is really the new part. We want to identify the risk, to identify the hazard, to evaluate this hazard, and to evaluate the risk and to manage them. And we want to, of course, take actions and measure the effectiveness. We keep the compliance monitoring, as we said, and very important, we want competent personnel informed about significant issue. And this is really mirroring the safety promotion aspect of the ICAO Annex 19. And last but not least, we need to document, of course, our processes. And all this is not really completely new. All this was developed on the basis of air operation and air crew regulation. So it's not completely new, but we have to say that we did some improvement based on the lesson learned and also on the development of the amendment of Annex 19. So a few improvement, but largely based on air operation and air crew regulation. So from EASA side, we know a little bit. This SMS and management system has been introduced in other domains, and here we would like to take the chance to share what we have seen and what are the main challenges when implementing this SMS. So the first main challenge, and this we have seen many issues with this, is really the organization manager, the senior management. They need to take on board this concept, and it's important that they are willing to take accountability and to support the management system and the safety management system. What we have seen as a problem also was the competence of the quality and safety manager. So, and also the fact that this attitude towards safety needs to be shared by all the line of management, not only the safety manager. My light just switched off. Let me just. Here you go. What we have seen as a difficulty as well to embody this is really the process to manage the risk, and this is really important to not do a ticking exercise, but really to get some good result out of it. So the risk management is really important. And of course, what we have seen sometimes is a lack of monitoring of the risk mitigation, which is an important part of the system. So what is new as well is from the competent authority side, and it's important for the industry. So what is new is that we have harmonized our principle with OPS, and in particular, we have now the risk-based oversight principle embodied in Part CAMO. And the maturity of the management system of the organization will have an influence on not only on the oversight, but on the cycle as well. So on the number of audits, on the number of inspection from the competent authority. So the basis is the following. Today, like in Subpart G, the normal cycle is 24 months to audit the complete organization from the competent authority. Now with the Part CAMO and the management system, we give credit for the effort made by the organization, and we say, yes, if you have a good risk management, you manage your change correctly, you have corrected all the previous action, you should benefit, and we can increase the cycle from 24 to 36. Of course, if there are big findings, we can go back to 24. And another step, if not only you have done this good before, but you have put in place really a good communication, a good channel of information on report of the safety performance, on your compliance with the competent authority, the rule now allows to potentially goes to a cycle of 48 months. So what is also new in Part CAMO is three main points. Is that we have also aligned the rules of occurrence reporting with the regulation 376, and this is to avoid also again duplication in the reporting line. And also, like in Ops, we have introduced a flexibility to, in some case, a necessity to deviate slightly or to propose a different means of compliance to demonstrate compliance with the rule. And this is called the ALTMOC, the alternative means of compliance. So now this is offered as well as a good tool or mechanism to the Part CAMO organization. And last but not least, don't forget that if you manage as a CAMO small aircraft, light aircraft, you have to follow not Part-M, but Part-M Light, which might be slightly different, and there are a few differences, mainly simplification, I have to say. Huh? So from the AMC and GM side, what we have done, and this is a difference as well with AirOps, and this was intended to simplify a little bit the system and to take credit for also small organization. We did not go in the sense to differentiate management system implementation for complex or non-complex organization. Now we have set up a single set of AMC, which in fact from the beginning invite the organization to propose a setup which is really appropriate for their size, nature, and complexity. And here we believe that business aviation will benefit from this. So let's talk now about the transition. So we are speaking about transition from Part MG to Part CAMO. So as Kyle mentioned, we have a few dates here. The rule entered into force in September 2019 and became applicable in March. So this is a period typically where the organization has to prepare for the new rule. So this is the time to prepare. Now, when the rule becomes applicable, the rule gives the flexibility for the existing Part MG to request a Part CAMO. And you don't go through the complete initial approval. No, we offer the more easiest path. So you request Part CAMO, and basically we grandfather you. The competent authority will grandfather this organization and will issue, without much demonstration, will issue a Part CAMO, a new Part CAMO certificate. And when you receive this new Part CAMO certificate, you have to implement a plan to really work on the new, on the novelties proposed by the Part CAMO. So you are now a Part CAMO organization. You have received your Part CAMO certificate, but you are in a kind of transition mode, and you use your existing procedure. But you are audited and you are surveyed by your competent authority in accordance with the new rule, the Part CAMO. So the inspector will issue findings on the novelties Part CAMO. And for these novelties, the rule foresee to have more time. You have more time to correct them. So you have basically until 24 September 2021 to correct the finding raised on the novelties. Because you are still using your procedure, you have, of course, differences to Part CAMO. So these are picked up by the inspector, and you have more time to correct. And you have to correct them before 24 September 2021. And when you have closed all of these findings, then, and you submit your new exposition, your new manual to your competent authority, they approve it and they reissue the Part CAMO certificate with the reference to this new procedure. And from this point on, you are really a complete Part CAMO organization and your transition is finished. So basically, that's the mechanism that we have put in place to try and help. And what I can mention is that the Commission, it's not at EASA level discussion, but the Commission is discussing maybe to extend this date based on requests from member states and also from industry. Maybe this date will be postponed, but it's still within the end of the commission. So that was it for my side, and happy to take questions maybe later on, or Kyle will tell me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jérémie, for that clear and enlightening presentation. As I said, we'll take questions at the end of the initial interventions from the panelists, but I certainly have a few questions of my own that I'll put to you later on, but I invite you in the audience to come forward and put your questions to our panel. Any questions you may have as we go through these discussions, just enter them via the online Q&A function that you'll see on your screen. So next, let's turn to NetJets, who are actually in the midst of that transition mode that Jérémie just described between Part M, Subpart G, and the new Part CAMO. Paulo, could you now take us through your experience in NetJets and implementing these new rules, and what experiences you've had and any issues you may have encountered in the process? Paulo. I think you're on mute. We can't hear you, Paulo.
Okay.
Better.
Good morning. So, first of all, thank you very much to EBAA to set up this great conference once more, to Kyle and to Jérémie. In fact, we are transitioning one CAMO Part NG to Part CAMO, and we are applying for a new Part CAMO. So actually, we have two projects ongoing, and actually, this is a great opportunity to share our experience, and also to get some additional inspiration to overcome some obstacles during the process. And I'd like to thank you very much, Jérémie, from EASA, because the presentation was crystal clear and very appropriate to the point. And this is true that for us as an operator, you see this Part CAMO transition as a major cultural change. And we are in the middle of a perfect storm, because with the COVID-19, all the aviation industry is being challenged by different fronts, and it's not a good timing for us to invest in a major transition, but this is what it is, so you need to take that. But that's no doubt that this is a major change, and there is a lot of new demands and new competencies to put on the table. This is also a hope for us that are discussing with the EASA for several years, the changes from rule-based procedures to performance-based procedures. And I believe that this Part CAMO can be an enabler for us to abandon the old stuff, old school rules-based procedures that sometimes we don't even understand what is the impact on safety, to a more performance-based approach on that. I really appreciate the EASA approach, the flexible approach to EASA. For example, with the possibility for us finally to develop our alternate means of compliance, that's a lot of flexibility. And for example, on the SMS implementation is more than welcome, as Jérémie presented today. However, no one is ready for this level of flexibility. And in my presentation, I'll give some specific examples. Then when we have too many flexibility, we are stuck as the operators and the authorities, because we have difficulty to draw a line to define what is acceptable and what not yet acceptable. And this is something that we are struggling, and as the first pioneers in this implementation, there is nothing behind us or before us to use as a reference. So as a takeaway from this, and this is an old request from EASA, I strongly suggest that EASA should have a specific section on the FAQs section for the Part CAMO transition support. So, and with more delay, I'll try to move this. I was trying to move the slide, next slide, but this is not working. Okay, thank you. So the first takeaway is, after 24th of September next year, you need to be Part CAMO. So good news is Jérémie just opened the possibility for an extension. I'm sure that this may be welcome, because we are observing a major overload from the authorities to accommodate all the part CAMO applications and follow up in due time. That's a massive transition, and there are a high number of CAMOs in Europe. We are only 210 days away from the part CAMO to be a reality. And unfortunately, what we are observing, and we are working with different CAAs, is that not everyone is following the guide to transition. So Jérémie mentioned that it was discussed with the CAAs. However, not everyone is following the guide. So that creates more problems to the operators, because we need to go by each one rules and not follow the guide for the transition as it was done. And safety management is clearly the major thing. For the CAMOs already working with an operator, which is the case of NetJets, this is not a novelty, because already are supporting the SMS system for the EOC portion. So in the practical perspective and IT systems, we are extending the operator into the CAMO. For the standalone CAMOs without an operator, I do see a much bigger challenge, and I'm sure that there will be lots of questions, because for a standalone CAMO, this is all new, the safety management processes. Next, please. Okay. So, what are the good news on the part CAMO? As I said before, part CAMO for us makes a lot of sense. So finally, the safety management is not in the core of the CAMOs. We have the safety risk assessments, we have the voluntary reporting, risk registers, management of change, human factors, safety culture, voluntary reporting, ERP. It's now part of the CAMO and the IT systems. The documentation, and from my direct experience, is very good. They're very well written, very complete. So I believe that it was a good starting point, using the operations, air operations and air crew regulations as the base for the part CAMO. And in general, the material is clear, consistent, and we know what to do. Except on some specific cases that I will just provide some examples. And the first question is about this 10 steps approach proposed in the transition guide. Again, it seems that there is no full acceptance from the NAAs, and this means that that transition guide is not sufficient, and we need to work a lot with each NAA to understand what are their actual requirements and procedures to move into the part CAMO. For example, some of them just want a full application for part CAMO, and without this transitioning, i.e. approving the part CAMO, opening the findings, and then closing the findings. So it seems that there was not a full agreement within Europe, which is not new actually. Next one. This is a very interesting question. In the AMC1 CAME 300, there is a table of contents for the CAME, the exposition book. However, there is no explanations what are supposed to be placed on each paragraph. So, of course, most of the structure is from the previous part M to part G, so we can reuse the sense of it, but there are new entries that for us is still a puzzle. And a specific example is on paragraph 3.2, there is a reference to product audit of aircraft. In the CAMO environment, I really have difficulty to say what is this about. Is this the ARC physical review? Is the RTS documentation released to service documentation check? Is something else? Is the ACAM program? No, cannot be ACAM, that's something else. So for a CAMO, we are really struggling to understand what is this about. This was already asked to EASA, and it seems that EASA opted not to add more explanations and to explain the contents on the CAME structure. However, in practice, our experience is if we don't follow the recommended CAME structure on the AMC1, we run into trouble with the authorities, because they are expecting a CAME structure exactly identical to AMC1. So This is some questions that are still open, and of course, all contributions are more than welcome to help us out here. Next, please. And now this is a very interesting thing: assessment of non-mandatory modifications. So, according to the new part CAMO 315b4, there is a requirement specifying that the CAMO should establish a procedure to assess the non-mandatory modifications and/or inspections and decide on their application, making use of the organization's safety risk management process. Well, first of all, who defines the type of the modification is the TC holder. So the TC holder, when devises a modification, it makes a classification. So is this a mandatory modification, probably covered later on by an ED? It's an optional modification, and the TC holder takes in charge that the modification recommendation. And usually with the CAMOs, we look at the non-mandatory modifications and take a final decision. A good example that I can give is, for example, landing lights. No, there are almost all airplanes that have a non-mandatory modifications to install LED lights on an aircraft. It's clearly a non-mandatory modification. So the question is by this regulation asking the CAMO to make a safety risk assessment about the installation of LED lights on an aircraft that has conventional lamps there? Is not that the role and the responsibility of the TC holder? Because if there is a safety issue with the current solution, the TC holder should mark the modification as mandatory. So this is yet to be explored, and here we need additional guidance from EASA to say what this is meaning, because at the end of the day, this means that the CAMO can be overswamped with the lots, dozens, hundreds of non-mandatory modifications with risk assessments, just to prove that they are not interested. So it's something that needs to be further discussion. Next, please. Personnel requirements. So one of the basic requirements for all CAMO personnel is to attend the initial safety training with a very extensive syllabus. So it touches the human factors, the safety management, tools, processes, and then in the syllabus there are some topics that it is hard to see what is the benefit for the CAMO, such as C-shift work, noise and fumes, illumination, climate and temperature, motion and vibration, work logging and recording, shift task and over. So these are clearly important topics for the 145 organization, but not so relevant for the CAMO. And I remind that the CAMO is responsible to define the maintenance requirements and not to define how to comply with the maintenance requirements. That is up to the part 145 to translate the maintenance requirement, every task, into a job card. And that's on that translation that this type of topics needs to be taken in consideration. So why do you need to teach the CAMO personnel these topics? It's still to be understood. It seems that was something inspired on 145, but for the CAMO, illumination, well, I don't know what to say about it. Next, please. Personnel requirements. This is a good example of EASA flexibility, and as I said in the beginning, that is appreciated. However, the national aviation authorities maybe are not so appreciative of this, because what is published about the competency assessment, there is good guidance there, but that's open guidance, i.e. Each CAMO needs to think and to propose a specific implementation of a competency assessment. And this is a source for many questions, and again, this is new ground, there is no references, and that's difficult for us to draw the line. What is the minimum acceptable for a competency assessment? 3 questions, 1 page, 10 pages, I don't know. So the EASA opens up the door for flexibility, but the problem is with such a flexibility, we lose all references. And you should not forget that the people doing the Part CAMO approval are the people that were performed the Part MG approval before, where the things are much more prescriptive. So yeah, this is still a challenge for us. And next, please. And I finished the examples of questions with the part CAMO. But in general, I do see there is value here. I believe that this is something that all of us should embrace. However, we should expect more investment, and for some time we are going to have a duplicated effort. We have a new SMS safety management system to implement, and we need to keep the compliance monitoring system that, as Jérémie said, nothing is going to disappear. So we are adding more additional levels to the CAMO. So what I expect is later on, when this reach maturity, to be able to simplify the CAMO processes, and for us to have a performance-based approach to safety. And that's my take on this experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Those are some insightful questions. We're going to come back and maybe put some of those to Jérémie in a moment. But first, let's take a step back to the bigger picture on why SMS is an important element of maintaining and improving safety of business aviation in Europe. You're all very aware, Luxaviation are a large business aviation operator with AOCs and CAMOs spread across multiple EASA member states, and are well placed to give us a pan-European view on this and perhaps identify some of the challenges of ensuring consistent implementation of these rules across member states. Dave van den Langenbergh is the President of Aviation Services of Luxaviation Group and was recently as the chair of my European Leaders Committee at GAMA. So I know David well. Maybe David, you can explain to us why SMS is important to your organization, both as an operator and soon as a CAMO, and how do you think it will change how you and Luxaviation does business? David, over to you.
Thank you, Kyle. Also, I'd like to thank Paulo and Jérémie for, and I really second what they have brought forward, and I fully agree. Personally, I think in behalf of Luxaviation, I am very happy to see the part CAMO change. Why is that? Because of course we are a commercial operator. We are today in 9 European countries based. We have 11 AOCs in an EASA environment today. Due to the situation in the UK, that will change in January. But also there we are running in the process of moving to part CAMO. Why I'm so happy about this, because I always felt that the split between the safety management system in our operational part and then still having a quality management system in our part M environment didn't make sense. And it's a very good thing that this is now aligned with many benefits. Although, of course, and maybe what people tend to forget, an important part of part CAMO and safety management system is the management of change. Now, we all do know that changing an operation takes a lot of time and has some risks in itself. So changing from what was before to what we have to come to in part CAMO needs good attention and strong will. That is from the leadership of the company downwards to the whole organization, because every single individual in a CAMO environment will become part of the process, and that is really important. I like to compare it to maybe a football team. Some teams are struggling, and what they do is they hire a new excellent coach. But we all know it takes a long time and effort for a new coach to train the players to adapt to a new system of playing. And at the end, it will be in the weekend game. We will see the result if it's successful, yes or no. But all of that can only work if they all participate, they all train. And people tend to forget that to have a successful implementation, those players, they train day in, day out, only to play 90 minutes in the weekend. And that's exactly the same for our organizations. The biggest risk that I've seen, and that's based on what I've seen in the past also on the operational part, is that it's very complicated to get people out of their comfort zone. We have many skilled people, and that's both on the operator side, but also at the competent authority side. They have their way of working and their processes. And the biggest risk that I see is that people just put a new label on something they continue to do like they've done before. But that would be a very wrong way of implementing Part CAMO and an SMS. It's not by taking the name quality out and replacing it by safety that you have changed your manual correctly. There is excellent guidance like Paulo stipulated to and Jérémie shared with us. And it's really important to understand that it has to be a cultural change. It has to be a mentality change, and they all need to participate. If we are very honest with ourselves in big organizations, a big flaw and a miss is the reporting. And reporting becomes really important, and people need to see the importance of reporting and being part of the process. So I would highly recommend to take sufficient time and effort to implement this wisely and having every member of your organization part of the change of management process. This is so important because if you end up with relabeling, then you have failed actually in the exercise. What I also do think is important is that you need to understand the risk if you have not been an operator or not a commercial operator before, and the whole safety management system is new to you. The risk that I've seen is that larger organizations like us, Luxaviation, NetJets, for instance, of course, we were used to safety management from the operator side. There's a lot of support out of that team to implement this now in Part CAMO. And most likely because of the commercial need, the situation we find ourselves in, the perfect storm that Paulo said, that is exactly the case. So things are going quickly. And bigger organizations will be ready with the outcome and ready to present it to their competent authority. Now, the risk that I'm referring to is that for some inspectors at the competent authority, what they have received from these larger organizations might become a standard. And again, that's not the goal of Part CAMO. Like Jérémie explained, it's the CAMO organization that need to pick out the way they would do it. They need to present something to their national authority that meets the requirements, but of course that is also not no overkill. You cannot adopt a safety management system from a large organization into a smaller CAMO organization or a CAMO only organization, or even a smaller operator. And of course, all of these people are very skilled and professional and do a great job. But it would be wrong if now the local authority is just only referring to what they are familiar with, what they're comfortable with, what they have received from larger companies, and try to push that through on smaller companies. Because that for me would create a risk in its own, because it's way too much for smaller, simpler organizations. And don't get me wrong, using the word simple does not mean that it's not respectful. I mean, we do respect organizations with only like 5 or a couple of jets, or 2 jets or 3 jets, which is good. But also, but we need to understand they play a different sport, and they need a different coaching, and that for me is a really important part of a successful Part CAMO implementation. Of course, what I also am a bit worried about, we hear, we've heard today that there are rumors about a delay or an extension and more time to implement it. That is good, but can also be bad, because what also happens in life typically with human beings is that they postpone and they will wait and see what will come to them. And I would strongly recommend not to do that, but work closely together with your national authorities and implement those processes. That's what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much, David. We'll certainly come back to some of those points in a moment. But before we get into questions, I'd like to put a poll to our audience. If Corina could tee up the poll. So quite a simple question maybe, but the answer may be more complicated than you can address with a simple single choice answer. But do you think that the new SMS rules we've heard about today for CAMOs and the new EASA Part CAMO will deliver real safety benefits to European business aviation? 3 simple options. 1, yes, definitely, it's clear and obvious. Or yes, but the costs and the complexity outweighs the benefits. Or a simple no. Please submit your answers on the screen now, and we will present the results in a moment. As we're waiting for those poll answers to come through, maybe we start with the question. I think both Paulo and David addressed this point. As ever, it's a problem in the European aviation system where EASA defines the rules, but member states implement them. We always have concerns and issues reported of inconsistent application of the rules. So maybe a question to Jérémie: how do we ensure that member states consistently apply the new rules for Part CAMO? So organizations like David with AOCs in multiple countries, or Paulo can do the same thing in the same way in each of their states of operation. Jérémie, have you anything to tell us about how member states have been trained and briefed on these new rules?
Yeah, of course. The Europe is structured in a very particular way, that we regulate and we standardize the rules, and member states have to implement. So the member states are really the role of implementing, and to try to standardize this this implementation. We discussed with the member states. For example, this guide to transition was discussed with the member states in an advisory body to EASA, and of course we inspect the member states. So we know that it's not always perfect, but at least that's the tool we have. We use them to try and standardize maximum, and we answered also questions, and we try to support. Last week we had also a workshop with all member states and SMS expert for this implementation to Part CAMO. So we promote as well what we publish, and we do our best to standardize.
Thank you for that. And I think one, as Paulo mentioned, there's the concept of EASA FAQs have been used in the past to highlight some of these issues. If we, whether it's an EBA or any of the attendees here, have issues through perhaps Paulo as the EBA rep and the EM Tech to propose clarifications that could be included in the FAQs, would that be an acceptable way forward?
Yeah, we have a meeting in a couple of weeks with the MTech, and I know Paulo will bring this issue, and we will discuss that at this time. Yes, we are happy to, and we keep in contact with the industry as well. If there are specific needs, we will evaluate. Yeah, let's discuss in the MTech, I would say.
Yeah, that's the forum. Perfect, thank you. So we have the results of our poll question. It's not quite the 52-48 of the Brexit result, but not far off. So 61% of our attendees have no question of the benefits of SMS rules, but it seems we have some convincing to do with the other 32% who think the costs and complexity outweigh the benefits, and the 8% of skeptics in the audience. Maybe in the last 35 minutes of our discussion, we can convince some of those skeptics of the benefits. Let's first turn to some questions from the floor. So we have a question from Paulo.
Kyle, maybe just a small reaction on the,
sure.
In the question we spoke about safety benefit, but there are many studies and articles on other benefits than safety, like the benefits for the employee. There are reduced turnover, improved work condition. There are business benefit, better decision-making, reputation, and financial as well. Lower insurance premium, reduce cost, and so on. So that's also something to consider.
Very true. Very true. And maybe before we move on to the questions, then David or Paulo, do you have any reaction to those poll results?
For me, it makes sense. Probably I'll guess that this 32% that see that the cost investment outweigh the benefits are more probably the standalone CAMOs without any SMS exposure or any IT system to start with. That's exactly the area that we need to focus and to provide additional guidance and help to make the systems up and running. But I have no doubts that's the way to go. And as Jérémie just said, we need to look from all angles. And for example, if you are able to reduce the insurance premiums by having the part CAMO, or if this enables us to go into EASA type independent audits, that's a plus for the operation and for the business. So yeah, you need to see the bright side of it.
I do agree with Paulo a lot, actually. I think it's a great benefit, and I also do believe that the percentage of organizations that might be perceptive or might not think it's a good thing is again because they have not been dealing with SMS before to the extent that larger operations are. But the benefits are there, but I think there's also a great opportunity and I thank EBA for this event. But I think there's a great opportunity for associations to work together and help the participants with proper guidance and expert matter sharing.
Actually, I have a question for Jérémie, if I may, Carl.
Go ahead, Paulo.
Do you know if EASA is planning any additional webinar for SMS implementation for operators? Because using the same example that you gave for the member states, maybe if EASA can organize a webinar about SMS implementation, that will be a great benefit.
Yeah, we can see the interest in the question, and we did organize first with the competent authority because we were thinking that they are probably the best ambassador as well. And they are closer to the organization, and so we wanted to tell them more and convince them so that they can convince and explain the SMS to the organization. Of course, we can consider, and maybe we can discuss it again about workshop for industry, but yeah, we try our best to promote it. Yeah, in the limitation that we have as well.
Yeah, that will be more than appreciated by all industry, including the 8% that are more negative.
Yes, certainly. Well, I guess one thing we've learned from our COVID experience is that we can do much more online events. So we don't need to fill huge conference rooms in Cologne to these kind of briefings anymore. We can reach a large spectrum of industry through online events. That's something to be considered. So maybe if we go to a question from the floor. Question from Paulo Novembra about the impact on suppliers. So is, according to your previous experience, predictable a close linkage between pandemic effects on air carriers' supply chain and the prevention of supplier events? He references the Air France 4590 Concorde accident at La Gonesse. Where do we detect major failure of the regulation of SMS implementation on corporate structures? I guess the essence of the question is, how do we ensure that all your suppliers and contracted partners are following the SMS principles up and down the supply chain? And maybe put that first to Paulo.
Thank you for that question. Actually, that is one of the changes in the part CAMO. That's the subcontract agreements and contract agreements with our suppliers are much more stronger and explicit into the SMS and reporting schemes. So, for example, one of the points is before you sign a contract with a supplier, a vendor, we need to perform an on-site audit to make sure that they have developed a mature system.
Paulo, we're losing your audio connection. Oh, I think we've lost Paulo in mid-flow. Sorry about that.
Yeah, maybe what Paulo wanted to say, and I give him right, that we have a little bit more tools in part CAMO for the management of subcontracting, and I think he's back. But we have a point of the regulation exactly on this. Huh? Paulo?
Sorry, I had internet breakdown. Just to conclude, yeah, I believe that the new set of regulations improves the control of our vendors, and by connecting the safety management systems, give us much more visibility and clarity about each one performance. So it's more easily to spot any safety-related issues on the contractors.
Maybe linked to that question for myself. On the design and manufacturing side in relation to SMS, we've spent a lot of effort trying to come up with industry standards for SMS so that, for example, contracted organizations who may be doing work on behalf of multiple SMS regulated bodies have a consistent approach. Do any of you foresee a plan to develop some sort of SMS standard for CAMOs, or would that be of benefit?
If I can jump on that question,
Certainly.
I think a standard is important, but we should not forget that our standard in Europe is EASA, and I think it's really important to stay as close as possible as what the guidelines are, what the guidance is, what the EMCs are, and also dare to reach out and communicate with EASA on the issues that you encounter. Also, of course, with your national authority and the local competent authority, but you need to keep that communication open, and you need to dare to go into that conversation, because sometimes you see a lot that things are being presented as a must, but you need to challenge, and you need to make sure that what you do is adding value and is not keeping a certain individual happy. Combined with that, standards are good, but a big issue that I see in these discussions, and I also see that in the questions raised and etc., is that we need to make sure that everything we do is written in language and is written in a culture that the people that need to execute it understand, and that they speak on a daily basis. That is a major key, because if you keep it very high level or academic, you will see a disconnect between the department implementing this in the company, but you will lose the people around you, and that would again be a big fail in SMS.
It's an important point, David. And maybe a question for all of you. How do we ensure that SMS is not just a tick box exercise that you do for your next audit and then you file it in a drawer and forget about it for 12, 24, 48 even months, depending on the timescales? How do we ensure it's really part of the culture and the way of working of all levels of our organizations? Paulo, maybe you can touch on that.
That's a great question, Kyle, and this is related to the big cultural change. I believe that starts with all of us and with the accountable manager and down the line. So first is leading by example, and we have a practice internally that whenever that you spot a situation that has a merit to be reportable, even mandatory or voluntary, we simply ask to the people working on us that saw it or spoke about it to just report it. So to incentivation to reporting connected with just culture, meaning that reporting is good, is not a bad thing, and there is no persecution about the reporter, is a good thing. And so reporting, and especially voluntary reporting, that's something that is key for us. It's part of our performance. So we need to create discussion, we need to create the reports and go from there. Because we believe that if there is no reports, the organization is getting more and more unsafe, not safe. And so this has been done, and the best thing to do is for us that understand the value of part CAMO is to lead by example. I do my own reports, and I ask my team working with me to do the reports. So whenever that this is something that is not completely right, report it, let's learn from it, and we go from there. So that's the SMS in operation. I don't have any more magic wand on that.
And certainly occurrence reporting is an important part of it. David?
What I've seen is each time a major step forward is that you make sure that the team members are part of the management of change and the risk assessments, that you make them do the exercise. Initially they will think, yeah, this is not for me, this is for the safety department, or this is for that gentleman. But if you make sure you invite them and you really motivate them to be part of the thinking process, what the potential risks are, what they identify as a potential risk, that each time I do see it makes people understand the importance of this. And following by that, and I think that's a great thing that Paulo said, is the support to the occurrence reporting programs. That you know, before in the older days, old school days, the reporter or the one who raised the occurrence reporting was actually the quality manager often. But it should be the people doing the processes themselves. And if you reward that process and you also make it then part of your risk assessments and discussions as a team, you will see that the SMS is onboarded quicker and better.
Carl, if I may, I'd just like to add something important for David has said. All of us need to recognize that the safety department and the safety specialists are a facilitator for the process, and they should never take the lead on this safety reporting and safety investigations. They are there to help us out because they are experts and make sure that they are not deviating from our way, but that's a problem for us. That's a question for CAMO, not for the safety department to deal with. So we need to think that they are facilitators and they are not responsible for the SMS to work, not at all. That's us.
And maybe one point from my side, and coming from Annex 19 again, it's really the safety promotion. We have to communicate and organize maybe some session or panels or small video to explain to the staff this new feature that let's be part of the management of change, let's report, and safety promotion, communication.
It's an important point. And just maybe a plug for another part of this conference's agenda. There's more on Just Culture session, I think tomorrow afternoon, moderated by Johan Glantz, talking much more about Just Culture and ensuring that there's a fair and equitable reporting culture within our organizations. So don't miss that. Maybe if we take another question from the floor, Isabel Ferreira asked, she's an EASA MNT auditor, so that's the IATA EASA process, and also a safety compliance manager for a business jet organization in Portugal. She finds more and more important for business aviation to undergo EASA, some of business jets already are, and Part CAMO is definitely going to do a bit more in this direction. EASA will be more challenging, but a plus for the companies who wish to take the next step and raise the standards. Do you see business aviation going towards EASA in a more consistent manner? David or Paulo, do either of you have any experience or knowledge of the EASA process and how it might interface with?
I can take that on board. NetJets was already EASA certified. We just stopped to work with EASA because we have an aircraft which is Part 23, and Part 23 is not in the EASA checklist, so it's not possible to keep that. But my experience with EASA is, I fully agree with Isabel, and EASA has a good set of requirements regarding the safety management system implementation follow-up, which is more challenging, I agree, but that's a good fit to keep us in good shape in terms of SMS and making sure that the system is actually working. So fully agree with Isabel.
Thank you, Paulo. Another question, take one from the chat, this time from Wesley, who asks about AMC CAMO 305G, which describes the requirements for other trainings such as continual structural integrity program and maintenance steering group. Are organizations now required to organize these additional trainings for staff already working for several years in a CAMO? Can such training not be grandfathered? Although this might be more difficult to demonstrate during CAA audits. And maybe I can pose that question to Jérémie.
Yeah, I would need to, I don't have the text in front of me, but maybe you can channel this through Paulo, and maybe we can discuss this in the MTech or report if there is a problem on this MC.
Yeah, sure, I can take that on board.
Okay,
And if I may, just to the previous question, of course, we don't have only iOS, we have also EBAA that is also doing a great job on the SMS implementation support. So that's another option also for other operators. Yeah.
Thank you both. If we take another question from the floor, let's go for a topical one from RSE. I'm not sure who that is. When the FAA asked aircraft manufacturers to comment on SMS, many companies said it wasn't overkill and that safety was already high. Could we learn from the MAX, Trump 1000 issues, etc.? Question in these current times.
Yeah,
Jérémie?
I can maybe comment on this because CAMO is not the end of the journey, and we are now working on the introducing SMS in 145 together with introducing SMS in Part 21 for DOA, design organization and production organization. So EASA is doing the move, and it's the opinion should be for end of the year to do this. And we are also, of course, discussing with our counterpart FAA, and we know that it seems that they are now willing to go this way as well, and we understand that this is indeed Max contributed to taking this path for themselves. Yes, we have heard about that. So we hope, yes, we will all go in the same direction in the end.
Thank you, Jérémie. Maybe another question for you, Jérémie, because you mentioned it in your presentation about Part M Light, which is applicable to non-complex fixed-wing aircraft below 2,700 kilos. How will organizations or CAMOs that manage both aircraft above that threshold, so traditional CAMOs and the new Part M Light regulations for those below, how would you manage a mixed fleet of, shall we say, the complex and non-complex aircraft within these new rules?
Yes, it's true that with Part M Light, the exposition and the manual of the organization might introduce a few distinctions for these different fleets, because there are different forms and there are more simplified rules in Part M Light that you cannot apply in Part M. So it's a little bit maybe more work, but in the end, we believe it will be beneficial, because the Part M Light requirements are really light, let's say. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe another question on, well, just to talk about how this new rule will be scaled. So I'm aware that Luxaviation and NetJets are certainly not the smallest business jet organizations. Jérémie touched on it in his presentation that there is a concept of scalability in these rules. So whether you're a large CAMO, like we have here in the panel, or a small CAMO, there's a consideration for how to implement these rules. Maybe what help or guidance is there out there for maybe these smaller CAMOs to help adapt to these regulations? Jérémie?
But when we discussed this with our rulemaking group, there was one member saying, hey, if your organization has a simple activity, the SMS should be simple. So the more complex you are, the more complex SMS. SMS is really commensurate with your activity. If you are a small scope of activity, the hazard and the risk associated are of the same dimension, let's say. So that's what we try to reflect in our rules. And the main question in SMS is, how do I know that something is coming, and what am I doing about it? And that's really the essence of SMS. It's a simple question, in fact, to answer.
Jérémie, if I may, Carl.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just to complement Jérémie's question, I believe that the EASA position is a fair position and completely understandable. The point is, we have three stakeholders here. We have EASA, we have the operators, and we have the national aviation authorities. And if EASA say, okay, if you have a simple, make a simple SMS, we don't have the definition for a simple SMS. And you can take forever to agree with our National Aviation Authority what is a simple thing. And they will grasp, there is no reference, there are no lines, and the discussion drags forever. As David has said, I believe it was David, at the end of the day, you are left to opinion of an inspector to define what is simple. And this creates problems in the implementation of the concept.
That is exactly the case. And that is also the challenge that we have to deal with as business jet or general aviation operators. Because you can have a national carrier who has 2 or 3 types of aircraft. They might have many, but it's a very, in a way, it's a much simpler operation than a business jet company with 5 aircraft, but there are 5 different types. And you have service centers that you need to pick depending availability, so that can change every time. So your whole risk assessment and SMS and everything that you need to do might end up being more complex than for a national carrier. But again, it's a much smaller organization with much less budget. That's also a reality of things. All of these that we discussed need to be paid. So that adds flavor to the complexity as well. And there I fully agree what Paulo stated. You need to make sure to have a very good discussion with your competent authority, so that there is understanding on what your capabilities are, what your expectations are, and what you want to do.
Yeah, I fully agree, and that's really the reason why we started to talk, and we organized this workshop last week with the competent authority member states. Yes, they have to understand this message.
Certainly, and I would encourage any of the smaller organizations in the audience who maybe are struggling or bewildered by these new rules to certainly get in touch with the EBAA. I'm sure Corina and Johan will be happy to point you in the right direction and provide some guidance, or Paulo as the EBA interface to the EASA EM Tech Committee.
Exactly. This is the time to get those questions.
That's what the associations are here for, to help you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? See, try another one from Paulo Navon. How do we establish the conceptual and technical features of operational management and safety management related to organizational change? I think David maybe touched on this a little bit already. David, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I've been thinking about this and how to phrase that correctly. Well, again, it comes down to really facilitating all the employees in the organizations to be part of this. That for me is the main thing. And added to that, what Paulo said, you have to go away from a safety manager or a department that is leading the dance. No, they all need to participate in this. I do believe that, of course, if you have been an operator with an SMS program, then of course there's a lot of advantage there, because you get great support from those departments. But I wonder what the technical features could lead to. Data is important. Flight data monitoring, for example, that is something that I really embrace a lot, and I think should be in every airplane, my opinion. But again, that's my plea.
I guess maybe take it a bit wider. How do you show the benefits of an SMS to your staff in your organization? So let's say they submit a voluntary occurrence report. It goes into a system. How do they get feedback? How do they see what reports are being actioned? How do they see the benefits over time? What can you as an organization implement in terms of like visual management or communication to your employees that SMS is working and their concerns are being addressed as they're being raised?
We do communicate on a regular basis. So we do, we collect all the data, all the number of reports that we get in. and we boost that. We take good examples of reporting, and we explain also what the benefit was, what the safety aspect was. Was there any damage prevented? What the cost saving was, and we make it really a good news show. Not and not just to market it, but really about the content, so people see what the use is of their reporting, and so we issue quarterly leaflets on safety management, and we also, and there's a very good initiative that I've seen out of our experts, is that they do a little sweepstake that you can win something if you have reported and it has prevented from mishap. And those are the initiatives that we take to promote.
Yeah, and to complement this good practice, we in the MCGM, this is a message that we are passing, that anybody who reports should receive some sort of feedback. Maybe not on individual basis, but like leaflet, like David was mentioning, but there should be some feedback that so you are part of it, and what you reported helped the company and helped the system. So yes, it's very important.
Yep, certainly agree. Maybe if we go back to a couple of Paulo's questions from his presentation to make sure we've addressed those. Maybe Paulo, your question number 4 about the training syllabus. We could maybe put that to Jérémie. Paulo, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. When first see this training syllabus, the impression that we have that it was copied from the Part 145 organization training, and then we're just struggling to see what is the relevance of the topics, for example, the examples that I've presented. And by the way, this was raised by another EBAA members to the CAMO training. I understand from Jérémie that one of the possible explanations is that with the CAMO need to know the conditions of the Part 145. But the point is, when we're preparing training, and training is an investment for the CAMO, because it costs to prepare, it costs to deliver, it costs hours to people, not working but attending training. Sometimes I miss a good explanation, especially to the company managers. Why are you discussing these topics within the CAMO environment? We can elaborate on that rationale.
Yeah, the question is understood, and indeed this, because it's a safety training, and this is new, and this comes from SMS. We ask everybody in the company to have at least one initial training on safety, and safety training means also on the explanation of the SMS, but also human factor, human performance, and these are really basic concepts in continuing airworthiness. Whether you are ordering the maintenance or performing the maintenance, everybody should have the same notions and the same understanding. People should be able to talk to each other, like the SMS of the 145 will talk to the SMS of the CAMO. So the initial idea, maybe we can review the list, but the initial idea was to say people ordering maintenance, they should know the same as people doing maintenance, and it's the same domain, and these are basic notions. I mean, the fatigue, of course, it has more impact if you do maintenance, but it could be also used in a long shift of CAMO or lighting issue. So we can discuss, and we are open, but it's not that this 3 or 5 paragraph will cost thousands of euro more because you are deleting them, I believe. And these are good notions to know in general when being in this domain.
Okay, so Jérémie, you mean that when you go into the refresher mode, of course you can fine-tune the syllabus to the CAMO realities, right? So
we can discuss, but it's not that we will delete whatever is not CAMO work, because of course CAMO work is much different, but the influence of CAMO work and the impact is huge for the maintenance organization and the maintenance staff behind. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jérémie. Thank you, Paulo. Maybe Paulo, if you get any other questions for Jérémie from your presentation that hasn't been addressed yet.
Yeah, maybe one point on the details of the exposition. It's true, and we recognize we did not detail a lot of details in the exposition. In fact, there are several reasons for that. The first reason is that CAMO was the only type of organization for which we gave this level of details. And if you go to 147 or 145, you don't find this level of detail that was provided for the Part MG. But more than this, the main difference to the Part MG exposition is the SMS, and we didn't want. It's a bit risky to try and give a size-fit-all explanation of the SMS. As we said, you have to find yourself your way. You are the best person. Your organization is the best position to define what you need. So this was another reason not to do. And of course, we have also some limitation internally. But yeah, so that was the main reason. Maybe we can work on it in the future, but we need to. That would be a significant effort, and we need to find some room in the rulemaking program, and this maybe should be discussed. Is it a priority for the MTech or not? But we are open to suggestion on this.
I don't think this is a major priority. The point is if the EASA intent is to give flexibility, why did you create the table of contents for the CAMI? In that case, you should have removed it, right? That's nothing or all. So, but putting a table of contents and nothing behind it is like staying halfway.
The table of content is the traditional way we manage exposition and trying, yeah, to have at least a high-level vision of what is needed.
And that's a good tool because authority, I tell you, authority goes to the table of contents and they check.
And yes, it's a great tool to standardize. In fact, it's very much appreciated in standardization teams and in the competent authority.
Yeah.
But going to too much detail, it's another effort, and it's another maybe
Yeah, no, understand.
Well,
I just have another call if time allows.
Yep, certainly, go ahead, Paulo.
Go with Jérémie with the question number 3, which is about assessment of non-mandatory modifications. Here, Jérémie, I don't know if you can elaborate what was the intent of the regulator by asking these non-mandatory modifications to be assessed. What is the purpose of this?
Yeah, I think first we have to say that it's an AMC. It's not an obligation. And reading the AMC, I find it like, yes, I understand it like now that you have implemented SMS, you have new tools in your hand at your disposal. So when you receive, you were giving an example of modification on the light, but that could be something different. That could be a special procedure in case of heavy rain. And this, does it apply to us? What is the risk if we don't do it? So we are just saying that when you receive non-mandatory information, maybe the safety risk management or assessment can help you to make up your mind. It's a tool to make business decisions as well as we said before. So that was the intent. It was not to impose something new on the CAMO or burden. It was to help them.
Okay. Okay, understood. Thank you, Jérémie.
Okay, thank you, Jérémie. Thank you, Paulo. Maybe we're now at the end of our time. Maybe I'll just ask each of our panelists just to make a final 30-second conclusion of their thoughts and maybe advice to our audience members who are in the midst of this implementation process. Maybe start with Paulo. Any final remarks from your side?
Sure. Thanks, Kyle. Well, two advices. Even if EASA extends the deadline for the Part CAMO, don't wait for the deadline extension. And as David has said, I have experience with other mandates and other deadline extensions, notably the data link thing. and that's always a good practice to wait for the extension of the deadline. So start work. There is good work to be done, that's sure. And please use all resources available to you. The guide for the transition published by EASA, it's a great tool, as Jérémie mentioned. The guidance material is good. EBAA is here to help you out, and I believe that you are a large community that all of us can share our experiences. So don't try to do everything standalone because otherwise that will be much more difficult. So count on us. Let's work on the network collaboration and let's get this done.
So, Paulo, couldn't agree more. David, any final thoughts from your side?
Thank you. Thank you for the panel again. Thank you, EBA, for having this this great discussion possible. For me, the importance is that don't make the mistake to assign someone or a department in your organization to do this and have them prepare it and then come with the end result. That is the very wrong way of doing it. Make sure that you invite everyone that is available to you in the organization. They all have to be part of the process, and the success rate is much higher if they have been part of the process from the change from part M to part CAMO. So I do think it's important. It's good for me, especially. I think the lining up with the operational side of the company is a great step forward, and I can only encourage every single organization to go part CAMO as soon as possible.
Thank you, David. Good advice for sure. And Jérémie, final remarks from EASA side?
Yeah, from my side, I would also have to just two quick words. It's really make sure you develop something that makes sense to you, really, and also please, this event is attended by many managers. It's really important that you support it, because just culture can be destroyed in 5 seconds because of a manager making a bad remark or something. So really, please, managers, support it, and then this will make the system really work better. Thank you for inviting EASA, at least from my side.
Thank you, Jérémie. Well, thank you to all three of my panelists. I think we've had an enlightening discussion, and I think hopefully it has helped illuminate why SMS is important and why it should bring real benefits to your respective audience organizations. It's clearly not just about a tick box exercise. This is an issue of organizational cultural change in your organizations to bring about real safety and efficiency benefits to your organizations. And as ever, EBA and other associations are there to help you through this process. So by all means, reach out to Johan, Corina, and Paulo as your interfaces to help you through this process. So thank you to my panel, and thank you to EBA. And now I'll hand back with gratitude to Corina.
Thank you very much, Kyle, and thank you very much to all of you gentlemen for joining us today. And again, a special thanks to all of our attendees who were very engaged and sent lots of great questions. Again, if you did not get a chance to submit your question, or if we didn't get to your question, you are more than welcome to send us your thoughts, your questions at safety@ebaa.org.